The champagne glasses sparkled under the crystal chandeliers as Rebecca moved through the crowded ballroom. She had attended dozens of these charity events before, always wearing the right dress, saying the right things, smiling at the right people. At 23 years old, her life had been carefully orchestrated by her parents since the day she was born. Tonight was supposed to be no different. Her mother had spent an hour that evening making sure every detail was perfect. The diamond earrings, a family heirloom, the silk gown, custom-made in Paris, even the way Rebecca wore her hair had been discussed and debated. Everything had a purpose in the Harrison family. Everything was about maintaining their image, their status. Their control over one of the largest shipping companies on the East Coast. Rebecca stood near the dessert table, politely nodding as Mrs. Patterson droned on about her son's latest business venture. She had heard this speech before. Mrs. Patterson's son, Gregory, was the man her parents wanted her to marry. The merger had already been discussed over private dinners and golf games. Nobody had bothered to ask Rebecca what she wanted. That's when she noticed him. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo like the other guests. Instead, he had on simple black pants and a white button-down shirt, carrying a tray of appetizers through the crowd. But it wasn't his clothes that caught her attention. It was the way he moved, confident yet humble, and the genuine smile he gave to everyone he served, treating each person with the same respect regardless of their jewelry or status. Their eyes met for just a second as he passed by. He had warm brown eyes that seemed to actually see her, not just the designer dress and expensive jewelry. Rebecca felt something she hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. A flutter of genuine interest. A spark of curiosity about someone who existed outside her predetermined world. She watched him throughout the evening, pretending to listen to conversations about stock portfolios and vacation homes. While tracking his movements across the ballroom, he was clearly volunteering, not working professionally. During a quiet moment, he stood near the terrace doors, looking out at the city lights with an expression of contentment that Rebecca envied. Without overthinking it, she walked over. Beautiful view, isn't it? He turned, surprised that someone from the party was speaking to him. It is. Though I imagine it looks even better from up here than from my neighborhood. His voice was kind, with a hint of humor. I'm Rebecca, she said, extending her hand. Michael, he replied, shaking it. I teach history at Roosevelt High School. I volunteer at these events because the foundation does good work for underprivileged students. They talked for 20 minutes, and Rebecca couldn't remember the last time she'd had such an authentic conversation. Michael spoke passionately about his students, about the kids who came from nothing but had everything inside them waiting to bloom. He asked Rebecca about her interests, not her family's business or her connections. When she mentioned her love for painting, something she rarely discussed because her parents considered it a waste of time, his face lit up. That's incredible, he said. Art gives us a way to express what words can't. Do you show your work anywhere? Nobody had ever asked her that. Nobody in her circle took her painting seriously. It was just something rich girls did to pass time before marriage and children. But the way Michael asked, with genuine interest, made her realize how much she'd been diminishing her own passion before she could answer. Her mother appeared at her elbow. Rebecca, dear, the Pattersons are leaving. Come say goodbye. The smile on her mother's face didn't reach her eyes as she glanced at Michael. Clearly dismissing him as unimportant, Rebecca excused herself, but she couldn't stop thinking about Michael. She found him again before the night ended and did something completely unlike herself. She asked for his number. Writing it on a cocktail napkin when he didn't have a business card, the next 6 months changed everything. They met in secret, in small cafes, far from her neighborhood. In public parks where nobody from her social circle would ever visit, Michael showed her a world she'd never known existed. They visited free museum days and outdoor concerts. They ate at tiny ethnic restaurants where the food was authentic and delicious. He introduced her to his friends, regular people with regular jobs who laughed freely and didn't constantly compete with each other. With Michael, Rebecca felt like herself for the first time. She started painting again, really painting, not just dabbling. He would sit in his small apartment and watch her work, asking questions about her techniques and what inspired each piece. He never tried to change her or mold her into something else. He simply loved her for who she was, not for her last name or her trust fund. She knew it couldn't stay hidden forever. Her family had expectations, schedules, plans. Gregory Patterson had already proposed, though Rebecca had managed to delay giving an answer. Her father was growing impatient. The merger was important to him, and Rebecca was just another asset to be negotiated and positioned correctly. The truth came out on a Tuesday afternoon. Rebecca had left her phone on the kitchen counter while taking a shower at the family estate. Her mother, always suspicious, always controlling, had gone through it. The text messages with Michael, the photos of them together, the evidence of 6 months of secret happiness. When Rebecca came downstairs, both her parents were waiting in her father's study. The phone sat on the mahogany desk between them like evidence at a trial. Her mother's face was tight with anger and disappointment. Her father's expression was colder, more calculated. "Sit down," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Rebecca sat, her heart pounding. She'd known this moment would come, but she wasn't prepared for the ice in her father's eyes. "Who is this Michael Rodriguez?" her mother demanded, holding up the phone. "A teacher. Are you completely out of your mind?" "I love him," Rebecca said. Surprised by the steadiness in her own voice, her father laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Love. You're willing to throw away everything for some school teacher you've known for 6 months." "He's a good man," Rebecca said. "He's kind and genuine, and he cares about making a difference in people's lives." "He's poor," her mother snapped. "He comes from nothing. He has nothing to offer you." "He offers me honesty," Rebecca shot back. "He offers me respect. He sees me as a person, not a business transaction." Her father stood up, walking to the window. "You've been promised to Gregory Patterson since you were children. The families have an understanding. This merger will secure our company's future for generations. That's what this is about, isn't it?" Rebecca felt something breaking inside her, something that had been cracking for years. "I'm not your daughter. I'm just another piece of the business." "Don't be dramatic," her mother said. "We've given you everything. The best schools, the best opportunities, and this is how you repay us? By sneaking around with someone so beneath you." "He's not beneath anyone," Rebecca said, standing up, "and I'm not ending things with him." The silence that followed was heavy, oppressive. Her father turned from the window, and Rebecca saw something in his face that frightened her. It was finality. "Then you leave me no choice," he said quietly. "You will end this relationship immediately, apologize to the Pattersons, and proceed with the engagement. Or you will leave this house with nothing. No money, no trust fund, no family name. You'll be completely on your own." Rebecca felt the world tilting. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious," her father said. "You choose right now. Your family and your rightful place in this world, or some fantasy life with a man who can barely afford his rent." Her younger sister Jennifer appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide with tears. "Rebecca, please don't do this. Please just do what they want. I can't lose you." Rebecca looked at her sister, then at her parents. She thought about her grandmother, the only person in the family who had ever encouraged her art, who had told her to follow her heart. Her grandmother had died 2 years ago, and Rebecca still missed her every day. "I choose Michael," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "I choose to be true to myself," her mother gasped. Her father's face hardened even more. "Then you are no longer our daughter. You have 1 hour to pack your personal belongings and leave this house. Your credit cards will be canceled. Your trust fund will be dissolved. And you are never to use the Harrison name for any business or social purpose. You are nothing to us now." Rebecca walked out of that study with her head high, even though her legs were shaking. She went to her room and packed 2 suitcases with clothes, some photographs, and her painting supplies. She left behind the jewelry except for one simple bracelet her grandmother had given her, which she managed to slip into her pocket when her mother wasn't looking. As she walked down the grand staircase for the last time, carrying her suitcases, Jennifer hugged her tightly. "I'll miss you so much," her sister whispered. "Please be happy."
What?
"I will be," Rebecca promised.
What?
Though she had no idea if it was true, the front door closed behind her with a finality that echoed through her bones. She stood on the sidewalk outside the mansion where she'd grown up, with 2 suitcases and a phone with Michael's number. Everything she'd known, every security she'd had was gone. She called Michael. "Can you come get me? I need to tell you something." When he arrived and saw her standing there with her suitcases, understanding dawned on his face. "Rebecca, what happened?" "I chose you," she said simply. "I chose us. I chose the life I want to live, not the one they wanted to force on me." Michael pulled her into his arms, and for the first time that terrible day, Rebecca felt safe. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know how they would manage or what challenges lay ahead. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had finally chosen herself, and that was worth everything. Michael's apartment was nothing like the mansion Rebecca had left behind. It was a small 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of an old building, with creaky wooden floors and a radiator that clanked at odd hours. The kitchen was barely big enough for 2 people to stand in at once, and the bathroom had tiles from the 1970s that no amount of scrubbing could make look new. But when Michael carried her suitcases through the door that first night, Rebecca felt something unexpected. Relief. This tiny apartment, with its second-hand furniture and mismatched dishes, felt more like home than the mansion ever had. "I know it's not what you're used to," Michael said, watching her face carefully, "but it's safe, and it's ours for now. We'll figure everything else out together." Rebecca set down her bags and looked around. There was a small bookshelf overflowing with history books and novels, a comfortable-looking couch that had clearly seen better days, and photos on the wall of Michael with his students, his parents, his friends. Everything in this space had meaning, had been chosen with intention. Nothing was just for show. "It's perfect," she said, and she meant it. The first morning, Rebecca woke up to the smell of coffee and found Michael making breakfast before leaving for school. He'd left her a note with his spare key, some money for groceries, and a simple message that made her tear up. "Take your time figuring things out. There's no rush. Love you." After he left, Rebecca sat at the small kitchen table and realized she had no idea what to do with herself. For 23 years, every day had been planned for her. Private tutors, social engagements, charity boards, where she showed up and smiled but never actually worked. She'd never had a real job. She'd never paid a bill or grocery shopped or done laundry in a laundromat. She spent that first day exploring the neighborhood. It was nothing like the pristine, manicured streets she'd grown up on. There was a bodega on the corner run by a friendly older man who called everyone my friend. It's a small park where mothers watched their children play. A library branch that was worn but loved, full of people reading and studying. Rebecca walked into a cafe with a help wanted sign in the window. The owner, a woman named Rita, looked her up and down with skeptical eyes. "You ever waitressed before?" Rita asked. "No," Rebecca admitted. "But I'm a fast learner and I'll work hard. I really need this job." Something in Rebecca's voice must have convinced her, because Rita sighed and said, "Fine. You start tomorrow at 6 in the morning. Don't be late." That first week of work nearly broke her. Rebecca's feet ached from standing all day. She dropped plates, mixed up orders, and burned herself on the coffee machine. The other waitress, a college student named Yolanda, had to show her everything from how to operate the cash register to how to carry multiple plates at once. "Girl, where did you come from?" Yolanda asked after Rebecca struggled to calculate change without using the register. "You act like you've never worked a day in your life." "I haven't," Rebecca admitted, too tired to make up a story. "This is all new to me." Yolanda studied her for a moment, then shrugged. "Well, you're trying hard. That's more than most people do. Come on, I'll teach you the tricks." The money was nothing compared to what Rebecca had been used to. Her first paycheck made her want to cry. It was less than what she used to spend on a single dinner out. But when she handed her share of the rent money to Michael, she felt a surge of pride she'd never experienced before. She had earned this. It was hers. Michael never complained about the adjustment, but Rebecca could see the worry in his eyes. He worked long hours, often staying late to tutor students who needed extra help. He'd come home exhausted, and they'd make simple dinners together in the cramped kitchen. Pasta with jarred sauce, grilled cheese sandwiches, things Rebecca had never eaten before, but learned to make and actually enjoyed. The hardest part wasn't the work or the small apartment. It was the isolation. Rebecca tried calling old friends from her former life, but her mother had been thorough. Word had spread through their social circle that Rebecca was disowned, cut off, no longer worth knowing. Her calls went unanswered. Text messages were ignored. People she'd known her entire life walked past her on the street without acknowledgement. Only Jennifer, her younger sister, reached out secretly. They met at a coffee shop far from their parents' neighborhood, and Jennifer hugged her so tight Rebecca could barely breathe. "Mom and Dad forbid me from seeing you," Jennifer whispered, "but I don't care. You're still my sister." Jennifer slipped her an envelope with some cash inside. "It's from my allowance. I know it's not much, but I want to help." Rebecca tried to refuse, but Jennifer insisted. "Please, it makes me feel like I'm doing something. They talk about you like you're dead, Rebecca. Like you never existed. It's horrible." Those meetings with Jennifer became Rebecca's lifeline. Every few weeks they'd meet secretly, and Jennifer would update her on family news. Their father had quickly arranged for Gregory Patterson to court someone else, suitable daughter from another wealthy family. Their mother had redecorated Rebecca's old room, erasing any trace that she'd ever lived there. "Do they ever ask about me?" Rebecca couldn't help asking. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "No, Dad made a rule. Your name can't be mentioned in the house. It's like they've just deleted you from their lives." Rejection hurt more than Rebecca wanted to admit. Late at night, when Michael was asleep, she'd sometimes cry quietly, mourning not just her family, but the life she'd known. She missed her grandmother's antique furniture. She missed having nice art supplies instead of the cheap ones she could now afford. She missed feeling secure about the future. But then morning would come. Michael would kiss her forehead before leaving for work, and she'd remember why she'd made this choice. The love she had with him was real. It wasn't transactional or conditional. He loved her when she was exhausted from work, when her hair was in a messy bun and she had no makeup on, when she was struggling to figure out how to use a washing machine at the laundromat. 3 months after leaving her family, Rebecca found a small art studio that offered classes and studio space for a reasonable fee. It wasn't much, just a corner in a converted warehouse, but it had good light and room for an easel. She started painting again, really painting, not the safe, pretty landscapes her mother had approved of. She painted raw emotion, the feeling of walking away from everything familiar, the terror and freedom of starting over, the small joys of her new life, like morning coffee with Michael, the satisfaction of a good tip from a friendly customer at the cafe. Michael encouraged her constantly. "You're really talented, Rebecca. People should see this work. Who would want to see paintings by a disowned heiress-turned-waitress?" she said, trying to make a joke, but unable to hide the bitterness. "People who appreciate real art," Michael said firmly. "Not everything has to be about where you came from. Let the work speak for itself." One day at the cafe, a woman came in and noticed Rebecca sketching during her break. She introduced herself as the owner of a small gallery downtown, the kind of place that showcased emerging artists, not established names. "Those are good," the woman said, looking at Rebecca's sketches. "Do you have more work?" Rebecca's heart raced. "I do. I paint mostly. Bring me a portfolio next week. I'm always looking for fresh voices." Rebecca spent every free moment preparing her portfolio. She selected her best pieces, photographed them with Michael's help, and put together a simple presentation. She didn't use her family name. She submitted as Rebecca Anderson, using her mother's maiden name. When she went back to the gallery, her hands shook as she handed over the portfolio. The owner, whose name was Patricia, flipped through it slowly, her expression unreadable. "These are raw," Patricia said finally. "Honest. There's real emotion here. I like it." Rebecca could barely breathe. "Really? I can't pay you much for a first show," Patricia said, "but I can give you wall space for a month. If pieces sell, we split it 60-40 in the gallery's favor. Standard for new artists. Interested?" "Yes," Rebecca said immediately. "Absolutely yes." She ran the whole way back to Michael's apartment, bursting through the door with the news. He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing like kids. "I knew it," he said. I knew people would see how talented you are." That night, they celebrated with cheap wine and takeout Chinese food. Sitting on the floor of their tiny apartment because the couch was too worn out to be comfortable for long, Rebecca looked around at this small space, at this man who believed in her, at this life she was building from nothing. "Do you ever regret it?" Michael asked quietly. "Giving up everything for this?" Rebecca thought about her answer carefully. Did she miss hot showers that never ran out of water? Yes. Did she miss not worrying about money? Of course. Did she miss the comfort and security of knowing her future was planned out? Sometimes, but then she thought about her art show coming up, about the pride she felt earning her own money, about the freedom to make her own choices, even when they were hard, about loving someone who loved her for herself, not for what she represented. "No," she said honestly, "I don't regret it. This life is harder, but it's mine. That's worth everything." Michael pulled her close, and they sat there on the floor of their tiny apartment. Two people with very little money, but with something far more valuable. They had each other. They had hope. They had the courage to build something real. Rebecca's art show was 6 weeks away. She had no idea if anyone would come, if anyone would buy her work, if this could ever become something sustainable. But for the first time in her life, she was doing something because she wanted to. Because she had talent and passion, not because it was expected or required. She was finally free to be herself. And that freedom, she was discovering, was worth more than any trust fund or family name could ever be. The night of the art show, Rebecca stood in front of the gallery mirror, adjusting her simple black dress for the 10th time. It was nothing like the designer gowns she used to wear. She'd bought it at a thrift store for $15, and Yolanda had helped her hem it to the right length. Her shoes were borrowed from her coworker at the cafe, but somehow, looking at her reflection, Rebecca felt more beautiful than she ever had at those fancy charity galas. Michael came up behind her, straightening his tie. He'd bought a new shirt for tonight, even though she'd told him not to spend the money. "You look amazing," he said, kissing her cheek. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," Rebecca admitted. Her hands were shaking slightly. "What if nobody comes? What if they hate my work? Then we'll go home, eat ice cream. And you'll keep painting because that's what artists do," Michael said with a gentle smile. "But I don't think that's going to happen." They arrived at the gallery an hour early. Patricia was already there, directing the placement of wine glasses and small appetizer plates. The gallery was modest, nothing like the high-end spaces Rebecca's family frequented. But it had character. With exposed brick walls and good lighting that made the artwork glow, Rebecca's paintings were hung throughout the main room. 12 pieces in total, each one telling a story of transformation, struggle, and hope. There was one of a woman walking away from a grand mansion, her back straight despite the heavy suitcases. Another showed hands covered in dishwater, but with paint stains under the fingernails. Her favorite was the largest piece, a portrait of two people in a small kitchen, surrounded by peeling wallpaper, but looking at each other with absolute devotion. "They look even better on the walls," Patricia said, coming to stand beside her. "You should be proud. This is strong work." People started arriving around 7. At first, it was mostly Patricia's regulars, art lovers, who came to every opening. Then Michael's colleagues from school showed up, teachers who didn't have much money but came to support him. Yolanda brought her boyfriend and a few friends. Rita from the cafe came with her husband, both of them dressed in their Sunday best. Rebecca moved through the small crowd, her heart pounding. She listened as strangers stood in front of her paintings, discussing them, interpreting them, feeling something from them. A young woman stood in front of the kitchen painting for a long time, wiping tears from her eyes. "This is beautiful," the woman said when she noticed Rebecca watching. "It reminds me of my parents. They had nothing when they came to this country, but they had each other. That was everything." "Thank you," Rebecca said softly. "That means more than you know." About an hour into the show, Jennifer appeared at the door. She was alone, looking nervous, and glancing over her shoulder as if afraid of being followed. Rebecca's heart leaped at seeing her sister. "You came," Rebecca said, pulling her into a tight hug. "Of course I came," Jennifer whispered. "I told Mom and Dad I was at a friend's house. I couldn't miss this, Rebecca. Your work is incredible. They walked through the gallery together, Jennifer asking about each piece. Rebecca explained the stories behind them, the emotions she was trying to capture. For those few minutes, it felt like they were kids again, sharing secrets and dreams. I'm so proud of you, Jennifer said, her eyes shining. You're doing what you love. You're being true to yourself. I wish I had your courage. You will, Rebecca said. When the time is right, you'll find your own path. Jennifer couldn't stay long, afraid of being caught. Before she left, she hugged Rebecca again and whispered, Don't give up. No matter what happens, don't give up. By the end of the evening, 5 of Rebecca's paintings had sold. 5 red dots placed next to the frames, indicating someone had found enough value in her work to pay money for it. The amounts weren't huge, standard prices for an emerging artist. But Rebecca's share would be enough to pay 2 months of rent. She stood there staring at those red dots, hardly believing it. People who didn't know her family name, who didn't know anything about her past, had chosen to buy her art. They'd bought it because it moved them, because it meant something to them. Michael wrapped his arms around her from behind. See, I told you, I sold paintings, she said, still in shock. Real people bought my paintings. Real people bought art by a real artist, he corrected. This is just the beginning, Rebecca. They celebrated that night at a small diner, the kind of place they could actually afford. Rebecca couldn't stop smiling, couldn't stop talking about every person who had complimented her work, every conversation she'd had. For the first time since leaving her family, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she was going to be okay. 2 weeks later, Rebecca was working the morning shift at the cafe when Rita called her into the small back office. Her boss's face was serious, and Rebecca's stomach dropped. Had she done something wrong? Was she being fired? Sit down, Rita said, gesturing to the only chair not covered in supply boxes. Rebecca sat, mind racing through all the mistakes she might have made. Rita pulled out an envelope from her desk drawer. This came to the cafe yesterday. It's addressed to you, care of this location. Rebecca took the envelope with shaking hands. The return address made her freeze. It was from a law office she recognized, the firm that handled her family's legal affairs. You want me to stay while you open it? Rita asked, her voice kind. Rebecca nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She carefully opened the envelope and pulled out a thick letter. As she read, her hands began to shake so badly that Rita had to take the letter to read it for her. My God, Rita breathed. Rebecca, is this real? The letter was from her grandmother's attorney. Her grandmother, who had died 2 years ago, had apparently created a separate trust fund for Rebecca before her death. The trust had been set up with specific conditions that couldn't be altered by Rebecca's parents, and the conditions had finally been met. According to the letter, Rebecca's grandmother had known that her family might try to control Rebecca's life through money. So she'd created a trust that would only be released to Rebecca if she demonstrated independence and self-sufficiency for at least 1 year. She had to prove she could support herself, make her own choices, live on her own terms. The attorneys had been quietly monitoring Rebecca's situation. They'd verified her employment, her art sales, her living arrangements. She had met all the conditions. The trust was now hers, no strings attached. The amount made Rebecca's head spin. It wasn't as much as her original trust fund would have been, but it was substantial, enough to change everything. Rebecca sat in that small office, staring at the letter, and burst into tears. Rita held her while she cried, not understanding everything but knowing it was important. My grandmother, Rebecca finally managed to say, she knew this might happen, and she protected me. Michael met her at the apartment during his lunch break after she called him. She showed him the letter and he read it twice, his expression unreadable. This is amazing, he finally said. Rebecca, this changes everything. You could move somewhere better, buy a nice studio, really focus on your art, But there was something in his voice, a hesitation that Rebecca caught immediately. What's wrong? Michael sat down heavily on the couch. Nothing's wrong. This is wonderful news. It's just, your grandmother was smart. She made sure you learned to stand on your own first. She wanted you to know you could make it without family money. And I did, Rebecca said, sitting beside him. We did. Together. Yeah, Michael said quietly. But Rebecca, you need to think about what you want now. You don't have to work at the cafe anymore. You could travel, study art abroad, do all the things you dreamed about. Rebecca realized what he wasn't saying. You think I'm going to leave? I think you should consider all your options, Michael said carefully. I love you, and I want you to be happy. If that means Rebecca cut him off with a kiss, I'm not leaving. This money doesn't change how I feel about you or the life we're building. If anything, it means we can build it together without constantly worrying about next month's rent. Are you sure? Michael asked, searching her eyes. I don't want you to stay because you feel obligated. I'm staying because I want to, Rebecca said firmly. Because this past year, as hard as it's been, has been the most real and honest year of my life. The money my grandmother left me isn't about going back to my old life. It's about having the freedom to create the life I actually want. They talked for hours, making plans. Rebecca would keep painting, maybe rent a proper studio. Michael could finally fix his car that was always breaking down. They could afford to get married without going into debt. Maybe even plan for the future they'd been afraid to discuss. But first, Rebecca had to respond to the lawyers and officially accept the inheritance. She called Jennifer to share the news, and her sister squealed with joy. Grandma was always the smartest one in the family, Jennifer said. She knew exactly what she was doing. Oh, Rebecca, I'm so happy for you. Has anyone at home found out yet? Rebecca asked. Not yet, Jennifer said. But they will soon. The lawyers have to notify them that the trust has been distributed. Mom and Dad are going to be furious that they couldn't control this. Rebecca felt a twinge of nervousness at that thought. But it was mixed with something else. Satisfaction. Her grandmother had outsmarted them all, protecting Rebecca even from beyond the grave. That evening, Rebecca stood in the small apartment that had become home, looking at Michael as he graded papers at their tiny kitchen table. She thought about the mansion she'd left behind, the life of luxury and control. She thought about the past year of struggle and growth. And she thought about the future, opening up with new possibilities. The money would make things easier, but it hadn't made her. She'd made herself through hard work and courage and love. The inheritance was just a gift from someone who believed in her, who wanted her to have the freedom to choose her own path, and Rebecca had chosen. She'd chosen love over obligation, authenticity over appearances, struggle over comfort. She'd chosen to be herself. Now, with her grandmother's final blessing, she could continue that journey with a little more security and a lot more hope. 3 days after receiving the letter from her grandmother's attorneys, Rebecca was signing the final paperwork in a downtown office when her phone rang. It was Jennifer, and her voice was panicked. They know, Jennifer said breathlessly. The lawyers had to inform them officially. Rebecca, Dad is absolutely furious. He's saying Grandma had no right, that she was senile when she made that trust. Mom is worse. She's talking about contesting it, finding some way to block it. Rebecca's hand tightened on the pen. They can't contest it. The lawyer said it's ironclad. I know, but they're going to try anyway. Rebecca, you need to be careful. Dad said some really scary things. He said you manipulated Grandma, that you don't deserve a penny. After hanging up, Rebecca sat in her car for a long time, her hands shaking. She'd known this moment would come, but knowing and experiencing it were two different things. Part of her wanted to hide, to avoid any confrontation. But another part, the part that had grown stronger over the past year, knew she couldn't run forever. That evening, she and Michael moved into a new apartment. Nothing extravagant, but it was bigger, brighter, with a second bedroom Rebecca could use as a studio. As they unpacked boxes, Rebecca felt the weight of the impending confrontation hanging over her. Talk to me, Michael said, noticing her distraction. What's going on in your head? I keep thinking they're going to show up, Rebecca admitted. That they're going to try to take this away somehow. Cole set down the box he was holding. They can't take it away. The law is on your side. But maybe you need to face them, not to fight, but to have closure. I don't know if I'm ready for that. You survived leaving them, Michael reminded her. You survived a year of making it on your own. You're stronger than you think." The confrontation came sooner than expected. Rebecca was at her new studio space, a beautiful loft with tall windows that let in streams of natural light. She'd been painting for 3 hours, lost in her work. When she heard footsteps on the stairs, her mother appeared in the doorway, dressed impeccably as always, but her face was hard and cold. Rebecca's father stood behind her, his expression unreadable. "So this is where our mother's money is going," her mother said, looking around the studio with disgust. "Supporting your little hobby." Rebecca set down her brush, forcing her hands to stay steady. "How did you find me?" "We have resources," her father said flatly. "Did you really think you could just take that money and disappear?" "Grandma left it to me," Rebecca said, keeping her voice calm. "It was her choice, her money. You have no claim to it." Her mother stepped further into the studio, her heels clicking on the wooden floor. "She was manipulated. You always were her favorite, always whispering in her ear, making her think the rest of us didn't care about her." "That's not true," Rebecca said, feeling anger rise in her chest. "Grandma made that trust because she knew exactly what kind of people you are. She knew you'd try to control me through money, just like you tried to control every other aspect of my life." "We gave you everything," her father said, his voice rising. "The best education, the best opportunities. We introduced you to people who mattered, and you threw it all away for what? For him?" He said the last word with such contempt that Rebecca felt her face flush. "For myself," Rebecca corrected. "I left for me. Michael was just the catalyst that made me realize I deserved to make my own choices." Her mother laughed bitterly. "Your own choices? Look at you, Rebecca. You're playing artist in some warehouse, pretending you've made something of yourself. Do you know what people say about you? That you're pathetic, that you had everything and traded it for nothing." "I don't care what your friends think," Rebecca said. "Those people never knew the real me. They only cared about my last name and what connections I could provide." "You ungrateful," her mother started. But Rebecca cut her off. "No," Rebecca said firmly, surprised by the strength in her own voice. "You don't get to do this anymore. You don't get to make me feel small or worthless. I've spent the last year discovering who I really am, what I'm actually capable of. I've worked hard, supported myself, built a life that means something to me. And yes, Grandma left me money because she saw that. She saw me becoming the person she always hoped I'd be." Your grandmother was a sentimental old woman who didn't understand how the world works, her father said dismissively. "She understood perfectly," Rebecca replied. "She understood that love shouldn't have conditions, that families should support each other, not control each other. She understood that being true to yourself is worth more than any amount of money or social status." Her mother's face twisted with anger. "Fine. Keep the money. Waste it on this fantasy life you're living. But don't come crawling back when reality hits. When you realize that love doesn't pay bills and passion doesn't provide security." "I won't come back," Rebecca said quietly, "because I've already learned that reality isn't what you think it is. I've learned that I'm stronger than you ever gave me credit for. I've learned that real security comes from knowing who you are and living authentically, not from a bank account or a family name." Her parents stared at her for a long moment. Then her father turned and walked toward the stairs. "Let's go. We've wasted enough time here." Her mother lingered for a moment, and for just a second, Rebecca saw something flicker in her eyes. Regret? Sadness? But then it was gone, replaced by the cold mask she always wore. "You were supposed to be our legacy," her mother said softly. "Everything we built was supposed to continue through you." "I am my own legacy now," Rebecca said. "And Grandma's. But not yours. Not anymore." After they left, Rebecca sat on the floor of her studio, her whole body shaking. She'd stood up to them. She'd said everything she needed to say. But it still hurt. Knowing that they'd chosen their pride, their image, their control over having a relationship with her. Knowing that they couldn't see past their own expectations to value who she actually was. Michael found her there an hour later. She'd called him after her parents left, and he'd immediately left school early to be with her. He sat beside her on the floor, pulling her close. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I know that couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," Rebecca admitted. "But it needed to happen. I needed to stand up for myself, to show them that I'm not the scared girl who left that mansion anymore. Over the following weeks, Rebecca threw herself into her work. She created her most powerful pieces yet, paintings that explored themes of family, identity, and freedom. Patricia scheduled another show, this time at a larger gallery that was co-sponsoring with her space. Jennifer continued to meet with Rebecca secretly, though it was getting harder. Their parents were watching her more carefully now, suspicious that she was maintaining contact with her disowned sister. "They're making my life miserable," Jennifer admitted during one of their meetings. "Constantly asking where I'm going, who I'm with. They're afraid I'll leave too. Will you?" Rebecca asked gently. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. I'm not as brave as you. And my situation is different. I'm still in college. I don't have a trust fund waiting for me." "You have options," Rebecca said. "You always have options, but you need to choose them when you're ready, not because anyone is pushing you." Rebecca also made peace with other aspects of her new life. She'd quit the cafe job, but she made sure to visit Rita regularly, always bringing pastries and catching up. Yolanda had become a real friend, someone Rebecca trusted and valued beyond the workplace connection. "You're different now," Yolanda observed one day over coffee. "More confident. You walk taller." "I feel different," Rebecca admitted. "Like I finally know who I am," Michael proposed. On a Tuesday evening, nothing fancy or elaborate, they were in their apartment, making dinner together, when he suddenly got down on one knee in the middle of their tiny kitchen. "I don't have much to offer you," he said, holding a simple ring. "No mansion, no trust fund, no family connections, but I can offer you honesty, partnership, and a love that will never ask you to be anything other than yourself. Will you marry me?" Rebecca said yes before he even finished the question. They kissed in that small kitchen, surrounded by the smell of burning garlic bread they'd forgotten about. And it was perfect. Planning the wedding brought unexpected joy. Instead of the elaborate affair her parents would have demanded, Rebecca and Michael planned something small and meaningful. Patricia offered her gallery space. Rita insisted on catering. Michael's parents, warm and welcoming people who had embraced Rebecca from the start, helped with decorations. Jennifer was the only family member Rebecca invited. She sent the invitation knowing it might not be possible for her sister to attend. But wanting her to know she was wanted, 2 weeks before the wedding, Rebecca received a letter. Not from her parents, but from her father's older brother, Uncle Thomas. She'd always liked him, though she'd rarely seen him since her parents had a falling out with him years ago. The letter was brief, but kind. He'd heard about everything that happened, about the inheritance and the wedding. He wrote that he was proud of her courage, that her grandmother would have been too. He enclosed a check for the wedding and an invitation to visit him and his wife anytime. "Well, I didn't know family could be like this," Rebecca told Michael, showing him the letter. "Supportive, without wanting anything in return. That's what real family is," Michael said. "It's not about blood or obligation. It's about choosing to be there for each other." The night before the wedding, Rebecca stood in her studio looking at her latest painting. It showed a woman standing at a crossroads. It's one path leading back to a shadowy mansion, the other leading forward into bright, uncertain light. The woman in the painting was walking toward the light. Rebecca thought about the journey that had brought her here, the fear of leaving everything familiar, the struggle of learning to stand on her own, the pain of rejection from people who were supposed to love her unconditionally, the joy of discovering who she truly was. Tomorrow, she would marry the man who saw her, truly saw her, and loved what he saw. She would surround herself with people who cared about her character, not her pedigree. She would step fully into the life she had chosen, the life she had built with her own hands. And she would do it knowing that she had earned every bit of happiness coming her way. The morning of the wedding, Rebecca woke up in the small apartment she'd shared with Michael for over a year. By evening, they'd officially be husband and wife. She lay in bed for a moment, listening to the familiar sounds of the city outside their window, the traffic and voices that had become the soundtrack to her new life. Yolanda arrived early with coffee and pastries, ready to help Rebecca get ready. They'd set up a small preparation area in the studio apartment. which suddenly felt cramped with dresses and makeup scattered everywhere. "Your hands are shaking," Yolanda observed as she helped Rebecca with her hair. "Nervous?" "A little," Rebecca admitted, "but it's good nervousness. Like I'm standing on the edge of something wonderful." The wedding dress wasn't what Rebecca would have worn in her old life. It was simple, elegant, and affordable, purchased from a small boutique run by a local designer. But when she put it on and looked in the mirror, she felt beautiful in a way she never had in those expensive designer gowns. Jennifer arrived at noon, slipping in quietly and locking the door behind her. Her eyes were red from crying, but she was smiling. "You made it," Rebecca said, pulling her sister into a tight embrace. "Of course I made it," Jennifer said, "though I'm going to pay for it later. I told Mom and Dad I had a school project. They're going to figure it out eventually." "I'm sorry," Rebecca said. "I don't want to make things harder for you." "Don't be sorry," Jennifer insisted. "You're my sister. Your wedding day is more important than whatever lecture I'm going to get. Besides, seeing you this happy, it reminds me that there's hope for something better." Da-da-da-da-da. As Jennifer helped with the final touches on Rebecca's dress, she spoke quietly. "I've been thinking about what you said, about having options. I got accepted to a study abroad program in Italy. Full scholarship. It would mean being away from the family for a year." Rebecca turned to look at her sister. "Are you going to take it?" "I think I am," Jennifer said, her voice stronger than Rebecca had heard in a long time. "Watching you build this life, it made me realize I've been too scared to even try. Maybe I need my own version of what you did, just a little less dramatic." Rebecca hugged her sister again, feeling proud and hopeful for her. "You're going to be amazing." The wedding took place in Patricia's gallery, transformed for the day with simple decorations and flowers. It wasn't grand or elaborate. There were maybe 40 people there, but each one was someone who genuinely cared about Rebecca and Michael. Teachers from Michael's school, artists Rebecca had met through her shows, Rita and the cafe regulars who had become friends, Michael's parents and siblings who had welcomed Rebecca into their family without judgment or expectations. Uncle Thomas and his wife were there too, sitting in the front row and smiling warmly. It meant more to Rebecca than she could express, having someone from her blood family there who accepted her choices. As Rebecca walked down the makeshift aisle, she wasn't thinking about what was missing. She wasn't thinking about her parents' absence or the grand wedding that could have been. She was looking at Michael, standing at the front with tears in his eyes, looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They'd written their own vows, and when it was Rebecca's turn to speak, her voice was steady and sure. "Michael, a little over a year ago, I walked away from everything I'd ever known because I believed in us. I believed that what we had was real and worth fighting for. This past year has been the hardest and most rewarding of my life. You've seen me at my worst, struggling and scared and completely out of my depth. And you've seen me at my best, creating art and finding my voice and becoming the person I was meant to be. Through all of it, you've been my partner, my supporter, and my home. I promise to always be honest with you, to build our life together as equals, and to never take for granted the gift of being loved for exactly who I am." There wasn't a dry eye in the gallery by the time she finished. Michael's vows were equally moving, speaking about how Rebecca's courage had inspired him to be braver, how her strength had made him stronger. When they kissed as husband and wife, the small crowd erupted in cheers. Rita was sobbing openly. Jennifer was beaming through her tears. Even Patricia was wiping her eyes. The reception was more of a party than a formal dinner. They'd hired a local band, and the music filled the gallery as people danced and laughed and celebrated. Rebecca spent the evening moving from group to group, hugging friends, thanking people for coming, feeling overwhelmed by how much love surrounded her. Late in the evening, Uncle Thomas pulled her aside. "Your grandmother would be so proud of you," he said. "She always said you had a spirit that couldn't be caged." "I'm glad you proved her right." "Did you know about the trust fund?" Rebecca asked. He nodded. "She told me about it before she died. Made me promise not to tell anyone. She said you'd need it someday, that your parents would eventually push too hard, and you'd need a safety net when you chose to fly." "She really knew," Rebecca said softly. "She knew your parents better than anyone," Uncle Thomas said. "She loved them, but she saw their flaws clearly. And she loved you enough to protect you from those flaws, even after she was gone. As the party continued, Jennifer approached Rebecca with a complicated expression on her face. I need to tell you something. Mom and Dad know I'm here. I posted a photo on my private account, and someone must have shown them. Dad called me 3 times. I didn't answer. Rebecca's heart sank. Jennifer, I'm so sorry. Don't be, Jennifer said firmly. I made a choice today. I chose you. I chose being here for your wedding over keeping them happy. And you know what? It feels good. It feels right. Maybe I'm finally learning from my big sister. They held each other for a moment, and Rebecca felt a shift between them. Jennifer wasn't just her little sister anymore. She was becoming her own person, making her own brave choices. Around midnight, as the party was winding down, Rebecca and Michael slipped outside for a moment alone. They stood on the sidewalk in front of the gallery, the city lights glowing around them. How are you feeling, Mrs. Rodriguez? Michael asked, wrapping his arms around her. Like the luckiest person alive, Rebecca said honestly. A year ago, I was terrified. I'd given up everything, and I had no idea if I'd made the right choice. And now look at us. Look at you, Michael corrected. You built all of this, Rebecca. The art career, the friendships, the life we have. I just got to be part of your journey. Our journey, she insisted. We built this together. They stood there for a while, just holding each other before heading back inside to their guests. 6 months after the wedding, Rebecca's career took an unexpected turn. A prominent art critic had attended one of her shows and written a glowing review. Suddenly, galleries in other cities were interested in her work. She had more commissions than she could handle. The girl who had been told her art was just a hobby was now making a real living as an artist. Jennifer did go to Italy, and she thrived there. Her emails were full of excitement about the program, the people she was meeting, the ways she was growing. She sent Rebecca photos of herself in front of the Colosseum, at a cafe in Rome, painting in a studio overlooking the Mediterranean. She looked free and happy. Their parents tried to cut off Jennifer's funding, but Uncle Thomas quietly stepped in to help. He told Rebecca it was what her grandmother would have wanted, helping both granddaughters find their own paths. Rebecca and Michael moved to a larger place, a real apartment in a nicer neighborhood. They could afford it now with Rebecca's art income and Michael's teaching salary, but they kept things simple, never forgetting the lessons they'd learned in that tiny first apartment. One afternoon, almost 2 years after Rebecca had been disowned, she was setting up for a major gallery show in Manhattan when her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. Is this Rebecca Rodriguez? A woman's voice asked. Yes, this is she. This is Helen Winters. I'm calling from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We're organizing an exhibition on contemporary artists exploring themes of identity and transformation, and we'd like to include your work. Specifically, the series you did about starting over. Rebecca had to sit down. The Metropolitan Museum. It was the kind of opportunity she'd dreamed about, but never thought possible, especially not this quickly in her career. After the call ended, she immediately phoned Michael. You're not going to believe this, she said, her voice shaking with excitement. When she told him, he shouted so loud she had to hold the phone away from her ear. Rebecca, this is incredible. This is huge. I know, she said, still processing it. The girl my parents said was wasting her life on a silly hobby is going to have her work in the Metropolitan Museum. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The exhibition opening was 6 months away. Rebecca threw herself into preparing, creating new pieces, and refining existing ones. The series she'd done about starting over had become her most personal work, raw and honest depictions of loss, struggle, growth, and triumph. Patricia helped her prepare, offering advice and support. You've come so far, Patricia said one day in the studio. I remember when you first walked into my gallery with that portfolio. You were talented then, but you were also scared and uncertain. Look at you now. Rebecca thought about that first portfolio. Submitted under a false name because she was afraid to use her real one. Now she was Rebecca Rodriguez's artist. She was proud of that identity. The night before the Metropolitan exhibition opening, Rebecca couldn't sleep. She lay in bed next to Michael, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. 2 years ago, she'd walked out of a mansion with nothing but 2 suitcases and a grandmother's bracelet. She'd been terrified, heartbroken, and completely uncertain about the future. People in her old social circle had called her foolish, said she'd thrown away her life for nothing. But lying there thinking about everything she'd built, everyone she'd become, Rebecca knew they'd been wrong. She hadn't thrown away her life. She'd finally started living it. She thought about her grandmother, who had believed in her enough to protect her future. She thought about Michael, who had loved her through her transformation. She thought about Jennifer, finding her own courage. She thought about all the people who had helped her along the way. Strangers who became friends, who saw her value when her own family couldn't. The next evening, Rebecca stood in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, surrounded by her paintings, watching as hundreds of people moved through the exhibition. Critics, collectors, art lovers, and curious visitors all stopped to look at her work, to read the stories behind each piece. Jennifer had flown in from Italy for the opening, and she stood beside Rebecca, squeezing her hand. "Grandma was right about you," she whispered. "You were always meant for something more." Uncle Thomas was there too, and Michael's parents, and all the friends who had supported her journey. Even Rita from the cafe had come, dressed in her finest outfit and crying happy tears, as Rebecca looked around at the crowd. At her art hanging in one of the world's most prestigious museums, she felt a deep sense of peace. She'd paid a heavy price for her freedom. She'd lost her parents, her family name, the security of inherited wealth. But what she'd gained was infinitely more valuable. She'd gained herself, and that she knew was worth everything they'd ever taken away.